conversation going. This is episode 7, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
7, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. All of these, just honestly, time has been flying by. I am one of your co-hosts, Chido Natasha, and I'm joined by the lovely, the beautiful, the wonderful, the brilliant.
Oh, goodness. Hey, everyone. My name is Natasha Mawera.
And we are joined by the wonderful Amy Genders over here, who is a student experience officer within the School of Management. Amy, how are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. I'm really pleased to be here.
Thank you. We're happy to have you. Today, we'll be talking about unpacking international student support with Amy, which is essentially going deeper into the kind of services that are offered to international students, self-explanatory, but that goes into depth, you know, ranging from things like financial support, academic support as well. Natasha, anything I'm missing out there?
I think anything that can disrupt anyone's learning experience, especially as international students, you're far from home. So much can happen, you know, be it financially, be it family crises that could affect your education. So really the session is just to find a little bit more about the support that you can get from the university, so that you don't struggle alone, or try come up with plans on your own so that you know what supports is available.
Yeah, that's beautiful synopsis. Amy, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know I've already said you're the student experience officer, one of.
Yep.
Yeah, tell us what you can.
Yes, so I'm a student experience officer. I've been at the university for 7 years in this role now. So it's been sort of, quite interesting. I started on the Singleton campus, moved down to the Bay campus, and obviously the last, 18 months have gone through sort of that online student experience. So it's been an interesting few years. I studied at Swansea University, so I did my English degree there. And I was one of those students who didn't know what they wanted to do, so chose a degree and then did something completely different, to be honest. So did my English degree, finished, and the following summer I got straight into my first youth work job, and then I've just continued working with people since then. So obviously it's great to have the degree, but I wouldn't say I've used huge elements of it, but report writing, so eye for details definitely be helpful, but my focus has ended up working with people a lot more. So prior to this, the majority of my roles were local government, and then, as I said, 7 years ago made the jump over to the university. So that's right.
Wow.
I'm interested to find out what transferable skills you learned while working with the local government, that then transferred into your role right now, or with the youth that you were working with, I think you said.
Yeah, so it was, all of my roles were people focused. So I started out in sort of youth inclusion and youth justice. So I was working with people who may have been excluded from school, had been offending behaviour. I worked with young people on TAG, just trying to get them back into positive activities, lots around sort of emotional literacy, focusing on their well-being, and just really trying to get them engaged in their communities, because lots of those young people were quite isolated within their communities. And from there, I kind of moved more into roles that were around alternative curriculum. So still working with young people, but maybe they were still engaged in their education, but couldn't go to mainstream education. So they might have had to have their sort of teaching on a reduced timetable, or smaller group sessions, less of that traditional curriculum. And then I think I got a little bit disillusioned, to be honest, with education. I was seeing lots of young people being referred to me when they were maybe 15, 16, felt a little bit that systems had failed them at times. And, you were getting young people coming through who weren't able to read and write. And I was thinking about, well, what's going to, happen to them when they leave this education? What's next for them? And so I actually went back into a role where I was working with parents. And then I was sort of working in a homeschool link type role where I would go into the young people's homes, but I was also trying to get the parents to engage with their education, feel more comfortable and able to speak to people at the child's school, to get involved in after school clubs. So I think a lot of the skills I got along the way were transferable in the sense that they were about supporting people. And I think one thing that I've learned is when I was working with little children, right up to when I was working with grandparents and everything in between, we might experience issues and difficulties in slightly different ways, but actually a lot of the things are fundamentally the same. People want to feel safe, loved, like they belong, and that's when you see the best in people. And sometimes circumstances can make it harder for people to feel like they're safe and that they belong and that they can, do as well as possible. So coming into the university, I mean, lots of lovely, great, engaged students who do wonderfully well by themselves, but sometimes life happens to them. And I think the skills that I've got from my previous roles really helped me with making sure that I can support people as well as possible, really.
Wow. I mean, I would give you the job again.
Right? If we could rehire you.
If we could,
Thanks, guys.
Honestly, but it's really important and encouraging to know that, people that are in positions like yourself within the university, do have that background and understand the different sensitivities that, exist around just life and navigating it and how it can affect, your schooling and everything. I guess with that, and just maybe focusing a little bit more on your current role at Swansea University, could you give us a whistle-stop tour around, what the past 7 years have been? What has your role entailed? What kind of supports do you provide, and other teams that you work with within the university?
Yeah, sure. So student experience, it can sometimes be the kind of role where you can't say no to everything. There's lots of things in there, and generally it can fit in student experience. So it's quite a varied role, but largely I would explain it as we do sort of one-to-one support. So we offer support for students with anything which impacts on them or their studies during their time with us. So students can self-refer to meet with us. They can go via academic mentors. Sometimes friends may get in touch. We get lots of our referrals via sort of employability or teaching staff. And in those one-to-ones, it would just be about building a relationship with the student, finding out what's going on for them and what it is they need help with. And generally the aim is that when they leave a session with us, they've got a bit more of a plan. There'll be things in their power that they can action and take forward, and there'll be things that maybe I need to do, for example, linking them up with our assessment team to make sure that they could get extenuating circumstances to get some extra time for an assignment. Sometimes that's all students will need, is one appointment to feel like, okay, it all felt like a lot, we've unpicked it, and now I've got a plan. For others, I might be that constant during their experience where they've met me early on in their studies, and then throughout the 3 or 4 years, they'll dip in, and if something goes wrong, if they're not sure of where to go, they'll ask to see me, or they'll drop me an email, and I'll point them in the right direction. We also do sort of things around the community. For us, a huge part is making sure that students have the best experience they can. Something we hear a lot, and particularly with international students, is, they're away from home. When we're younger, if you're out and you see other children, you just go up and you start speaking and you make friends. And suddenly, when you get to be an adult, you're kind of told that's a little bit of a stranger thing to do. And so something we hear a lot is, how do you make friends? And, how do I get involved in societies? Is it too late to get involved in societies? So we tend to run social events which are aimed at just being sort of low level and just facilitate a chance for people to meet each other. That's one of my favorite things, is when we'll do a session, you kind of see people, I don't know if I should be saying this in case people watch and then are looking for me looking, but you see people arriving by themselves and then they chat, and you kind of see that they'll leave, or you see them a couple of weeks later around the university having a chat. And I just think that's really lovely, because it just helps to break some of those barriers to meeting people. And we know sort of from experience, if you can get engaged in the student experience, you get more from university. You're likely to just enjoy your experience more. That may help you keep your stress levels down a little bit so that you can manage your workload a bit more, that you're more confident maybe to go for that part-time job. And I think we underestimate sometimes how important those connections are. So that's a big part of the role, is trying to build that community for people. And then some of the other stuff is more specific support. So I would be the disability link tutor for the business students. So if anyone has sort of an additional need or a disability, they can disclose that within the university. They get a needs assessment done. That information will be passed to me, and I could be a contact within the school, making sure that lecturers are aware what support they need to be doing, that type of thing. And one of the big things that I specifically work on is Welcome Week. So trying to get a program together that welcomes the students in, gives them the key information and gets them as ready as possible for the term ahead, really. In terms of the teams we link with, we work a lot with the campus life services. So those range, there's money at campus life, welfare, community, international at campus life. So we would be, for lots of students, that first point of contact. So something's going on for them, they're not sure of something, they come to us, and we may not have all the answers and the specific information. So if we had a student come to us and there were financial concerns, if it was around sort of, you know, they're just really struggling with that low level budgeting, they've never had a bank account before, we might say, look, here's some online resources, help them go through. But actually, if it's a bit more significant, they're experiencing hardship, we would help them to engage with Money at Campus Life for their specific specialist support. Same if an international student was to come to us either with a difficulty or a question around visa. Something we might get from international students quite a bit is, they're thinking maybe they might want to suspend their studies. What would that mean for them in terms of the visa? Would they be able to remain in the country? When would they have to leave? And often those you know, discussions or thoughts will impact their decision. And unfortunately, we aren't able to answer those specific questions, but we can make sure that you get to the person who can give you current, correct information. So those are some of the campus life services we work with. And wellbeing is another team that we link with a lot. So as much as I think we've got a great team in the school, when it comes to mental health support, it's really important to us within the university that, you know, our students are receiving support from appropriately trained, competent staff. So within the colleges and schools, we wouldn't offer counselling support. We'd be able to chat to someone, have them action plan and support them. But if they need that specific mental health support or counselling provision, then we would refer them across to wellbeing. We may continue to support them until they've got that appointment, so they don't feel that they're by themselves. But the teams are set up to really give that specialist support to our students, which I think is so important. And I'm really pleased. That was one thing I was really pleased to see when I joined, was that there were so many different areas that could help our students.
Yeah, that sounds really brilliant, honestly. And that was a very thorough explanation of everything that's around the School of Management. You know, you've touched a bit on the different experiences and the, you know, different cases that you might have. Since this episode is really based around international students, I have to ask, I guess it's somewhat of a simple yes or no question. Is there tailored support for international students? Because obviously you serve, you know, domestic students as well as international students, but sometimes international students could have, you know, certain issues that may be slightly unique to them. So is there any specifically tailored support for international students, be it in the college or in the uni in general?
Yeah, so the specific support for international students would be via International at Campus Life. Also, the International Development Office may be involved in some of that. But if it's sort of once they've arrived, if international students had any specific queries, were experiencing something that was concerning them, that fell out of the, you know, typical sort of query and was linked more to their international status, then it would be via international at campus life. It is an area that the schools sort of look at and consider how we can support. One development that's recently happened this year that came out of the International Development Office was for our faculty and one other. They chose to take on a new staff member who is focused on supporting students from China, so the Mandarin speaking staff. And this is kind of within the schools, it's the first step towards that bespoke support that I've been aware of, and it is around sort of not replacing the support, but maybe being a bridge for students who language barriers may be impacting their ability to get to the support they need. So we're finding already that that's having a big uptake there, and that, as I said, that's the one of the first steps. Some of the other areas where that specific support is with linking with the Centre for Academic Success. So you may have heard of modules for English for Management and some drop-in sessions. That's for students who've studied elsewhere and are coming to the UK, and either there's the language development is what the support they want, or actually just a different way of studying. Something that I've heard a lot from students is maybe when they've studied in their home country, maybe there's lots of little assessments, so they're worth 5% and then 10% and then another 10%, whereas here quite often modules might be, you know, one piece of coursework for 100% or a 50% exam, and that's a big difference that international students tend to tell us about. So suddenly each of those assessments feels a bit more high pressure than if one goes wrong and it was worth 5%, that's less of an issue than if one goes wrong and it was worth 70%. So the English for Management and the Centre for Academic Success, they do offer that support there around studies and things like referencing as well. That's something international students tend to mention, either that they've done something very different or it just hasn't been of the same importance. So actually it can be quite a shock then, particularly if they maybe are picked up for academic misconduct when they haven't realised how important it was or what they needed to do. So the support via sort of the librarians and Centre for Academic Success there, and they have started doing sort of more sessions specifically for the school that students again can either just choose to sign up to or actually via their academic mentor and lecturer, maybe when they're having discussions in class or when they're looking at work, it might be sort of suggested to them in case they're not aware of it to get involved in that support as well.
You know, that's really good. It sounds like not only do you have bespoke, I suppose, support systems coming in, but there's also such a broad range of different services that we have that we can offer to international students or any students that really need the support from the college or the university, which is really encouraging, to be honest. I know I've 100% benefited from engaging with student experience officers. I mean, I may have told the story already before, but after failing my second year, Laura Mail, accounting and finance student officer, a student experience officer, was my hero. Honestly, like the conversations that she had with me and the people that she directed me to were, yeah, I would not be where I am today were it not for her guidance and just her pointing her finger in the right direction to me. So yeah, 100%. I say to all the students out there, use the student experience officers if you need them, because I know a lot of international students, we either sometimes may not necessarily know of the services that are out there, or I don't know, be too afraid to speak about it because we might think that it's something that you've never dealt with before. But thinking about that, because I know you mentioned some language barriers that some students may have faced. What other issues have you seen that are, I suppose, specific to international students? And can you take us through the steps? I mean, you might just be able to pick one thing, but could you take us through the process that a student might go through if they were to approach a student experience officer?
Yeah, of course. Really pleased to hear that sort of Laura was able to support you in that way as well. I think you are absolutely right that students don't always know that the support's there, or there could be some other barrier to engaging with us. One thing that I sort of do experience from international students is if it's relating to certain issues, sometimes with mental health. Different countries deal with things in very different ways. Some things that are recognized as a sort of a real health issue here. In others, there's still a lot of stigma, or certain personal choices here are completely open and people are comfortable with them. And in others, sharing those things about yourself could have, huge consequences for you. So for students then coming to the UK and engaging in the system, I can appreciate that some of them want to suss you out. They want to check if they can trust you. They want to find out where you're recording information and see what's going on. So generally, if a student was to get in touch with me, I would go back, and I'm quite, you can probably notice I'm quite talkative. So for me, I would try not to just sort of signpost information. Usually my first go-to would be to say, I'm really happy to meet up. If you want to have a chat about things, we can do that. Do you want to do it in person, on Zoom, or via phone? Lots of people will say, yes, great, I want to talk it through. For others, they might not be ready, so they could do it via email. And then I would just try and find out what's going on for someone. Something I found with students is they'll come with maybe something, and then once they trust you and you talk, there's a whole bigger picture, but actually they've just slipped something in, and then you unpick it and you go from there. So for international students, lots of them will experience the same things as everyone else. But one thing that we will get, particularly sort of, I guess, not so much in the first couple of weeks, but once it comes down for new students, it's almost that, culture shock. Things are different. They're away from home. Things seemed exciting, and now we're slipping into reality, and what does that mean, and how do they feel, and some things don't quite make sense, and why do some people now do certain things, because it just seems really illogical. So those are one area with international students. They might want just somewhere where they can ask the question that they might feel silly asking it somewhere else, and student experience is a great place to do that, because they might ask one question and we can kind of go, oh, okay, they probably meant this. English is a strange language and certain words mean lots of different things, which is really unhelpful. For other people, it might be that actually they feel quite isolated and they don't know how to get anywhere. They don't really know the layout of the city. They don't know if it's safe to go places. Students coming from different areas, it may be that they couldn't go in certain places of their cities, and they want to know where those places are in Swansea, or they want to know that if they go somewhere in Swansea, will they be able to get home? Do buses stop at a certain time? Those settling in, we'll get a lot of those things. We might get with international students some specific situations where something is going on in their home country that is particularly difficult. There's a crisis. They have concerns about the safety of their family and friends, or they maybe can't get their fees through to them, or they haven't been able to speak with their family for a couple of days. And in those circumstances, we would be someone that they could talk to. We would I'd be encouraging them to be kind to themselves during that time. So if they've got deadlines come in, maybe they can't concentrate as well as they wanted to, and they can't do all the research they thought they would be able to. Do they want to access extenuating circumstances, so that we can give them a little bit of extra time with assignments to take a little bit of pressure off at that time. It doesn't resolve things, but it means that they've got a little bit more space to just be processing what's going on, reaching out to friends and family for support. Maybe they will speak with our listening service, and they might reach out. There's lots of faith services within the university, within the society. They may speak to other people who are going through similar things, but the college can help to just try and take the pressure that we can off, to give students space to just process. In terms of the financial side of things, we'd link with Money at Campus Life. So there's hardship support there, but also in specific times, it may be something else could be available, or they could advocate and speak to the finance department to see if students can get a little bit longer, if they've got a fee payment coming up. So lots of the support is about, I guess, how we can link and communicate with other departments to help the students know that they're not alone in this, even though the college can't resolve what's going on. We might just be able to give them that support that means they feel they can continue with that studies at a time where lots of other things feel really unsettled. We might be able to be a little bit of a constant thing for them to help. As I said, people need to feel safe, and sometimes just having that consistent and going, okay, I'm not going to be in trouble for not doing my assignment. I can defer that until later in the summer. And right now I'm going to get some wellbeing support. I'm going to, look after myself, and then I'm going to think about that assignment again.
Yeah, no, that's really good to know that, first of all, that you initially want to speak to the students. I think that's so important. One thing I know for international students is that initial step can be really scary. So having someone at the other end of it who's willing to listen and actually, just honestly listen, instead of just pointing us in a direction without actually hearing what could be the real issue beneath it all. Because I know Natasha and I we're both from Zimbabwe, and we both, at one point, I think they canceled Visa debit cards that were abroad. And so we literally had no access to bank accounts, and that not only affected our mental health, but our academics. It was definitely reflecting in that. And obviously the more important thing is it affects your tuition. So I'm curious to find out what happens when these issues directly affects a student's ability to afford their education.
So within the college, this wouldn't be something we specifically deal with, but where a student is in that circumstance, I would still encourage you to come and speak to us. And as I said, we can get you in touch with Money at Campus Life, who can also have conversations. If you give your consent, they can advocate on your behalf and have those conversations for you. And so it would be liaising with the income team to look at sort of when payments are due. Is there any opportunity for a payment plan? There is no guarantee anything could be done, so I don't want to sort of be here saying there is, but I am aware of student circumstances where actually something had gone on that meant getting that that funding through to make payments wasn't possible, and I'm aware of sort of payments being delayed, longer payment plans happening. One of the big things I would say is communicate and let sort of ourselves and let the income team know what's going on, because with that dialogue, support can come from it. When communication doesn't happen, you can get those emails and those letters that just feel really horrible. If you're in a place where you're struggling and you're unsure anyway, then getting those emails or letters saying you've got an outstanding payment just escalates and makes things feel worse, and probably makes people feel like they can come forward even less so. So that communication, if you come forward, then it may be that we can make sure that people don't get those emails and those letters, so that there's a delay with the payment, so people aren't feeling that increasing pressure at a time where they're thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to keep going? There is, through Money at Campus Life as well, sort of hardship funds. They're slightly different for international students, but both the international and the home hardship funds, as far as I'm aware, they can't be used to pay fees. However, there is funding sort of available to support students when they're in hardship for kind of cost of living things, so that if those day-to-days are a stress, then perhaps there's something available through Money at Campus Life to take a bit of that pressure off, in conjunction then with talking with the relevant departments to try and sort of look at the payment option around fees. If it was that education wasn't possible to continue with at that time, we can also talk about things like suspension. So not necessarily that you have, that's it, your education is over and you can't complete your studies. It may be for some students the right thing is to take a year out, to stop their studies at that point and come back the next year. I know sort of for students it's very different circumstances, and for some people that would, they definitely don't want to think about for suspension. For others, they didn't know it existed and they're really relieved to hear it, because actually for them it would be great to take that year out, go back, work, reset and come back.
Thank you. You mentioned communication as something that's important for students to be able to engage with regards to accessing the services that are available. What other advice would you give students who might be experiencing some sort of crisis, whether international or not? What kind of advice would you give a student who just might be going through troubles where they might need these support systems?
I say this all the time and it always feels really fluffy. I know I've already said it a few times, but for me, one of those big things is being kind to yourself. So when we're in a crisis, we can get hypercritical and that doesn't help. I'm saying this because I know that I can definitely drift into that, and it's a message I have to tell myself as well. So first thing would be sort of be kind to yourself. You've mentioned communication, but I guess if you feel able to at that time, be proactive, whether it's sitting and making a list of the steps you can take, if it's looking online to see who your welfare contact is within your college or school. So for some students, it might be enough that, okay, they can just send an email to a student experience officer, because then in that next meeting, we can go through steps and we can look at what's going to happen there. You know, look at the website as well would be another step. If you don't feel like you can talk to someone, then you can go on sort of the My Uni pages for the School of Management, and that would give you lots of information about extenuating circumstances and things that could help with your studies. But also if you just put in, you know, campus life, then it would get you to those services, that money, international, welfare, get you to well-being, the community team. So just putting in that search will get you linked up. They've got lots of online resources on there. We've also got something called Together All. So if you use your student email account, you can access togetherall.com free of charge. And that's kind of an online support platform. So for some students experiencing a crisis, they're not ready to speak to their college or a health provider, but doing something online and having a look and starting to think about support, it could be that first step for them. There's it's kind of like a forum-based support on there as well. So it's peer-to-peer, and sometimes putting something out there and seeing like, oh, actually like 10 other people experience that, and this one's saying they're coming to the end of their third year and I'm in my first year and I didn't think I'd be able to keep going. Things like that can make a difference as well. One of my sort of I guess big things that I definitely didn't do at university but wish I had done is, in those first couple of weeks, bookmark key pages and key information. So at that point, hopefully everyone will be enjoying and feeling great, but actually just go on early in the year and see who your welfare contact is and make a note of it somewhere. Save your student handbooks, save a link to the, you know, the central services, and know that they are there. And lots of them hopefully you won't have to use, but it's just easier to go, oh, okay, where was all that useful stuff I saved? Then in that moment of crisis, going, where do I start? Because when everything feels too big and we feel like things are out of control, it can kind of paralyze us a little bit and stop us moving forward. But if we go, okay, what's my one action I'm going to do? I was going to be dipping to my useful links. It's easier to get going then, because I guess our brains can be really unhelpful, and if there's too much for us to think about, I just think about something completely different. But we just have to go in and look at the links. You can go, okay, well, maybe I'll send the email today. So
yeah, going back to something that you mentioned earlier, and I suppose something that has been a common theme, it is about communication and students reaching out. But what can happen, especially, you know, if we talk about, you know, things like mental health, and even just not being used to it, reaching out and asking for help. Sometimes that initial step, which, you know, from how you've talked about the different services that are available, is a very key part. Some people may not be able to initiate that themselves, and things might escalate, and they are then getting those scary emails in their inbox, but they weren't able to communicate in the first place simply because, you know, maybe they just didn't have the strength to. How can the university more proactively, you know, approach some of these students, or even just raise more awareness of the services that are available before things get to a bad stage?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It's one that I haven't got a full answer to, because it's something that we're always thinking about as well. And I think for different students, and even just, I think, different years, some years we do something and the uptake is great and we're like, we've cracked it, this is brilliant, and the next year the uptake's terrible and we're like, no, but we cracked it. So it's something that we're constantly looking at and seeing and trying to do as much as we can within the school. What we try and do as well is revisit those things that didn't work before, because we know different students will access things differently. So we're trying to, with the use of Canvas, to use Canvas more for different types of announcements, so that students are getting things there. We may email them. We've started sort of a SOM community Instagram page, so that might be to put on information about events and things that are going on, but also just so they can see a little bit more of the staff in the team, so that we can share things from those central services and our student union. So it's another reminder of things that are going on from that side of things. We try and do some of that sort of preventative stuff on a kind of a low-key, more indirect type thing. So for me, when we're running our events and our social sessions, those are about that prevention. So it's about giving students an opportunity to do something fun, but actually they've met me whilst we're playing, I don't know, laser tag or crazy golf, and so that they've seen my face, they've spoken to me. So when it comes to emailing me, I'm not just an unknown name, even though, look, you know, they've never thought that that was a preventative thing for well-being, but it is about making those links, making sure that those support staff are visible to students, not just at a time of crisis, but just part of the community at SOM. So I know other staff and myself, when we are on campus, if we see students in the common room or in the atrium, you know, it's stopping and having a chat, so that then if they need to approach you about something serious, they're not thinking, oh, everyone's going to be looking, because staff are just kind of having those discussions anyway. So it's a little bit lower pressure from that side of things. But it is something that we know there will be students who always check their emails, and there's students who never check their emails. So trying different routes to offer support. You know, we do try as much as we can, but if any students ever have ideas, we would love to hear them, because we would definitely be sort of jumping on those ideas to see as well. Something that we do, which is you know, if as a student you've kind of generally passed kind of exams and done well, then you may not be aware, but some of the other things we do is, after sort of teaching block 1, when students get results, we will reach out. So if students haven't maybe submitted work or they haven't engaged in exams, those students would be reached out to kind of check in. We try and put messages via academic mentors as well. So for some students, professional services and this type of support is very different, or something they don't engage with, but actually the academic voice is stronger for them. So it's making sure academic mentors and our lecturing teams know about who to get students to for support, because that might be a different route there. And we do get that sort of sometimes where a student will come and an academic has referred them and they've never heard anything about us, but they've had that discussion and that was enough for them to come along. And I think with certain students as well, if they are told by an academic to go, they take it more as a direction rather than an option as well, I think. So we do tend to get some like, I've been told to come here, and then you kind of have to unpick a little bit what's going on and just remind them, you know, it is voluntary, but I think this is going to be good, right? What's going on? How can we support you from there?
Yeah.
Okay. I would just wrap up with like one question. So one of the things that you talked about was feedback from the students, like if they have any ideas to reach out to you. My first question is, how do you review your processes? Do you have any student surveys? Is it through student reps or some, you know, mandatory annual review that you do within the department to review the support that you're giving students? Yeah, maybe let's start there, then I'll ask my final question.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so a little bit of a mix. So one thing that hasn't come up so far is but the student rep system. So that's something that my colleague Pete, and before him, my colleague James, was leading on sort of within the school. That's one of the big ways that we get feedback. So it's that student voice element where, you know, they can speak to the cohort, find out what's going on, and feed that back. And we tend to get that sort of formally through the staff student forums, but also informally. So those discussions, once, you know, reps have built those information, they may come and just say, look, we're hearing this a lot, or this is kind of going on, or, you know, students are feeling that they need more information on referencing, so that we could then say, brilliant, we're going to put on another session on referencing. Or I think last year students were asking about sort of those remote exams, so some extra guidance went out on remote exams, some sessions were run. So that's one area we get a lot of the feedback is via the reps. There is also the student surveys. So obviously the NSS is for final year students, but there are surveys done with first year students, second year students, and postgraduate students, which are internal surveys to the university. And from those, the results are reviewed and a plan is put in place, a plan as well for final year students for the following academic year that looks at reviewing all of that feedback to see where we need to develop. So that is sort of one of the areas. Then student experience, I think we're in sort of quite a lucky place as well, in that students do tend to open up to us a lot. So we might get some really helpful, you know, feedback directly, and be that good or bad. I think, you know, sometimes students will feedback on the service and we'll be able to go, oh, we actually didn't realize that, but that's really helpful to know. Great, we can. The other thing, when students are in a position where they're experiencing a difficulty and they're not sure how to cope, then sometimes family maybe come involved, and often we'll get sort of feedback via family about how a student has been experiencing things and how the support has happened. For me, the feedback's really important. One thing that I and my colleague Janet did was we found we'd get quite a lot of feedback about sort of I guess learning and teaching, so about how lectures were going, about how lecturers were performing. Students would speak to us because it felt a safer space. So Janet and I then a couple of years ago did the postgraduate certificate in higher education, which is the qualification new lecturers do. So we wanted to do it to make sure that we knew what lecturers were being kind of advised and taught to do, what the best practice was, so that then when students would come in with concerns, we could be like, okay, yeah, that sounds really off, we need to address this, and go, or we had the insight to go, okay, it sounds like what's going on there is this, this and this, and be able to sort of reassure and sort of help support a student. So we found that you know, feedback has not only changed the service, but it for Janet and I encourage us to upskill to make sure that we were giving the best service from that perspective as well. I'm trying to think if there's any other ways. I guess one of the things with SOM as well is the student experience team. Even though we're separate, we link closely with sort of the employability team. So sometimes those routes as well, students may feel comfortable talking to certain staff and giving some feedback, or they might, you know, be thinking about their future and their employability and their personal development. And then through those discussions, one of the employability coordinators would say, oh, a couple of students are saying kind of this thing, is there anything you could do from a well-being and or welfare perspective? So one of the things that led to was I this year did a workshop with the team for our placement students about sort of stress and handling particularly that online working. So those kind of cross team links get us some feedback as well.
That sounds amazing. I think that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us and just sharing, honestly, this wealth of knowledge. And really put it succinctly in this video. And I'm pretty sure it'll be very, very helpful to the students to know what kind of support that they can get. And also just thank you for being you.
Oh, bless you. Blushing at the end.
Thank you for caring. Honestly, it makes a really big difference in students' lives. And just before we go, could you share how students could get in touch with you, be it an email or a website where they can submit a form, something. Yeah.
Of course. So my personal email is a.genders@swansea.ac.uk, but the team email is currently somexperience. And then the other thing they can do is follow som_community at Instagram. So those are the sort of the three main ways to get in touch. You know, and always here, really happy to support students. So please get in touch if you need support, but also if you've got ideas around support, if you've got thoughts on, you know, an area that we're missing or not quite giving enough support, if you've got like fun ideas about events, activities, we're always really open to those kind of things as well. So please do get in touch, and thank you both for having me. It's been lovely. You do such a great job. I'm always in awe at sort of how well you speak and how great you are. So been a pleasure to join you.
Thank you for agreeing to be on here. You are honestly an absolute star. I mean, I learned some new things. I'm always learning new things when we interview people here. So thank you so much, Amy. It was lovely to have you.
No problem. Thank you.
All right.
Make sure you subscribe, notification bell. What else, Natasha? What am I forgetting?
Like, share with your friends, your family, anyone who'd benefit from this conversation.
Yes. But keep the conversation going, and hope you have a smile today. Bye, everyone. See you next time.
Bye.